What's up, everybody? Izzy back in with another Q&A today. Today was my first day back on pre-workout, and I only use it on the last 8 to 10 weeks of a diet, and throughout the rest of the year, I don't use any. So if you notice any difference in my answers today, let me know in the comments. On to the first question. Does estimated 1 rep max in different rep ranges give us a clue to anything? So this seems to be something that a lot of you are interested in, and a lot of you think there's something to it. I really don't believe that there's anything to this at all. I think estimated 1 rep max it's almost entirely worthless for hypertrophy training, other than like if you want to if your rep range is 5 to 8 and you got 9 reps and you're trying to figure out what weight to use next time, estimated 1 rep max can give you an estimate of what weight to use next time by calculating a 6 rep max or something, right? Because it'll be close enough. Now, if you're drastically better at 5 rep maxes versus 15 rep maxes, what does that tell us? Does that tell us that you're fast twitch? Does that tell us anything about your genetics? Does that mean you're getting a better hypertrophy stimulus from 5 rep sets? No. It just tells us that you're more efficient in the 5 rep range, which for most of you is because you're a former strength athlete or current and you've only ever done low reps. Let me remind you of a very famous strength contest between Fred Hatfield and Tom Platz. Fred Hatfield, for those who don't know, is a powerlifter. He was the first guy to ever do a 1,000-pound equipped squat. So him and Tom Platz had a little contest. Tom Platz, obviously the IFBB pro bodybuilder, famous for a long time for having the best legs ever, especially for the era that he was in, way ahead of his time. They did a 1 rep max first. Hatfield got up to 855 pounds, which is like 9 plates a side, and Tom Platz did 765, which is 8 plates a side. Then they did a max rep contest with 525. Platz got 23 reps with 525 and Hatfield got 11. What does this tell us? It tells us that Tom Platz very often did 20 rep squats in his training. Lee Priest has gone on record saying more than once that he saw Tom Platz more than once do 500 pounds for 20 reps. Whereas we all know that Hatfield as a powerlifter was never doing sets over 10, right? Now, this may be counterintuitive, but the rep range that you're most efficient in has nothing to do with hypertrophy stimulus, because hypertrophy stimulus comes down to mechanical tension. And what produces mechanical tension? Mechanical tension, the volume of mechanical tension, is produced by reps that involuntarily slow down. So those reps before failure that get very slow and grindy. And in all actuality, that is the only thing that's determining the hypertrophy stimulus, which is why we have studies showing on average, not in every single case, but anything over 30% of 1 rep maximum taken to failure will produce equal hypertrophy results set for set. So anything between like 5 to 30 reps. So again, you could train in a certain rep range and get a lot better at it, but that doesn't mean that it's going to improve the hypertrophy stimulus. It just means that you're now performing better from a strength perspective in that rep range. But the whole time, as long as you're getting those slow, grindy reps, you're getting a hypertrophy stimulus. The second reason why I think this has pretty much no value is it's just a lagging indicator. So let's say you're bad at 15 rep sets because of cardio. Well, it would have been a lot easier for you to just finish the set, realize that you're gasping, that the last few reps that you didn't slow down at all, and that you had a cardio failure, than it would be for you to plug in your weight and reps and calculate your estimated 1 rep max and then do an investigation. The more direct feedback is how you felt right after the set. The more direct feedback is the bar speed during the set. So you don't need to go off and calculate estimated 1 rep max. You should be able to feel the SFR during and after the set. So the way that you're going to determine the best rep range without using estimated 1 rep max is by looking at your stimulus and fatigue proxies. Are you getting tension in the target muscle? Are you getting disruption in the target muscle? Do you feel a pump in the target muscle after a few sets? Are you getting sore in that target muscle the first few times you do the exercise, or when you do that exercise with high volume? And then you're going to look at fatigue proxies. Is it hurting your joints? Is it causing a cardio failure? Is it causing a pain tolerance failure? Does it feel like the failure point is the actual target muscle? And that's how you'll decide, not based on estimated 1 rep max. For the best hamstring training, should you do leg curls first or should you do hinges first? So I know this isn't necessarily relevant to the question, but hinges to me are not for hamstrings in the same way that a bench press is not for chest. Yes, it trains the chest. The chest might even be the primary muscle that you're focusing on, but why do you still lock out your bench press then when we know that the top half of a bench press is mostly shoulders and triceps? Because it's a compound movement that trains multiple muscle groups. Hinges are a compound movement that trains multiple muscle groups. And what do hinges train primarily? Hip extension. And what does hip extension primarily? The glutes. So you can do your hinges in a way that biases the hamstrings more with the straighter knee, and you can get a huge stretch on the hamstrings, and it can produce a ton of soreness because you're getting this extreme stretch under extreme loads, and it can give you good hamstring stimulus proxies. But at the end of the day, a hinge is always low back, glutes, and hammies, all of them. Whether it's a good morning, whether it's conventional, whether it's RDL, whether it's stiff leg, you can't separate hinge from all of those big muscle groups. It's a big compound movement. So to me, the answer to the question really just depends on how strong are you at hinges. If you're so strong on hinges that your low back has become the limiting factor, your low back recovery, low back fatigue, then I would suggest doing leg curls before your hinges to make them a little bit lighter and thus decrease the chances that your low back recovery becomes a limiting factor on your hinge performance and on your hinge volume throughout the week. You could also try that as a means to feel the hamstrings a bit more if you feel like your glutes are taking over, but that's usually a technique issue. So for me, unless you're super strong and low back fatigue has become a serious issue for you and you need to improve SFR, do your compounds first because it grows more. Leg curl second. For deadlift static holds, should you use double overhand grip or competition grip? This is a bit of a tricky question because I actually think there's scope for both. So double overhand is going to increase your base gripping strength more. However, the issue is that a lot of people, especially if your deadlift is like 600 and under, maybe even up to 700, depending on the size of your hands, it's usually not entirely a grip strength issue. It comes down to callus management and even gripping technique. And that's where using competition grip can really help you improve your technique. First of all, man, I'm really sorry you hurt your back. But, and I knew you knew there was a but as soon as everyone saw this filter. I can't help you with an injury over Instagram, especially to your lower back. And it's not because I'm scared of liability or anything. It's because I literally have no clue what happened. Your lower back, there's a lot that could be going on. It could be your SI joint. It could be muscular. It could be disc issues. And that's just right off the top of my head, and this isn't even my area of expertise. The other thing is you can't tell someone why they might have gotten hurt from a form video. I think people who do that are being super dishonest. It's just not something you can do. We've all seen someone do a deadlift with their back looking like a damn fishing pole that had a marlin on the other side of it, okay? And most of them walk away with absolutely zero back pain, even though we all know objectively that maximum spinal flexion like that is a bad idea. So sometimes injuries just happen. We don't always know why. So it's about doing what to do to get better. I want to add some strength training to the beginning of my sessions, but it ruins my stimulus proxies for all my bodybuilding work afterwards. What should I do? Well, you should decide if you want to be a bodybuilder or a powerlifter, man. This is a reason why power building is kind of power building in the sense of doing 1 to 3 rep maxes on SBD and then trying to do bodybuilding style accessories. You're just going to have to accept one way or the other that there's a trade-off. If you want to be a powerlifter, there's a size trade-off. If you want to be a bodybuilder, there's a strength trade-off. You want to try to do both, you trade off a little bit of both. 2 caffeine questions here. Question number 1, does caffeine impact your sleep even if you take it in the morning? When I take pre-workout, it's usually within 30 minutes of waking up, and yes, it still impacts my sleep. Although if you had asked me this a couple years ago, I would have told you that it didn't. But now that I have objective data to prove that it does, I can't really deny it. And caffeine is like that with a lot of people. They'll claim it doesn't impact their sleep, but objective measurements show that it does. Now, second question, why did I decide to take crack today? Well, I just felt like being a little methy. No, the back half of any diet that I do, I add pre-workout. It's just my drug periodization. And yes, caffeine is a drug, and that is how I periodize it. Second half of a diet is when I bring in pre-workout. How should someone transition from RIR training to failure training appropriately? Just rip off the Band-Aid, you fucking pussy. Nah, I'm just kidding, man. Take an intro week like anything else. I would recommend very minimal volumes for the first week, maybe even just 1 set per exercise. Maybe some exceptions for side delts or calves or anything else where you've established a really high MEV. But for the most part, just take the volumes really low that first week because you can't take the intensities low like you would in a normal intro week. But that's about it, man. Failure training is not some magical, mystical thing. You're not going to fight a dragon. You don't need a special team and just the right sword and a flame-resistant armor. You just, fucking do it. You shouldn't have your soul sucked out of your body by, a cable tricep push down to failure. Now, you might if you do a hack squat to absolute failure, but guess what? Your soul gets sucked out of your body on a hack squat at 2 RIR too, so what's the difference? How does one go about hiring you as a coach? Dude, I have no idea. I couldn't possibly think of one way that you could do that. I don't think I ever left anybody any clues on how to do that. Your guess is as good as mine. Is caffeine a net negative for gains? I would have to say overall that more often than not, yes, caffeine is a net negative for gains. Caffeine does improve your performance, especially like in the 6 to 12 rep range. There's studies that show you'll get more reps in that range. However, it's never been linked to an increase in hypertrophy. And the only reason as a bodybuilder that you would care about being able to lift more weight is if lifting that weight led to hypertrophy gains. And that's never been linked with caffeine. So there's just, and due to the fact that it could have negative repercussions on your sleep or make it more difficult for you to relax after training by keeping your heart rate elevated for longer throughout the day, it's a negative for recovery the majority of the time. Caffeine has a long half-life of 5 hours, meaning that if you took a 200 milligram scoop of pre-workout first thing in the morning, 10 hours later, 30% of that is still in your system. It's just a huge addiction source for people, and they don't want to give it up, and that's why it's so popular. Can someone ever make up sleep debt if they try hard enough? Well, if you try hard enough, man, you can do anything you want. You can be anywhere you want. You could even be the president. So yeah, sleep debt's not permanent. Like you can definitely get rid of sleep debt to the point where you're not sleeping longer than you normally would anymore because you need additional sleep to make up for sleep that you've lost. However, you will never get back a bad night of sleep. And what I mean by that is the negative effects the acute negative effects that you incur after a night of no sleep or bad sleep are permanent. It's like you can't get the gains back, that you would have had if you had gotten good sleep the whole time. What you can do is stop incurring more acute negative side effects by getting rid of the sleep debt. So yeah, you can definitely get rid of your sleep debt if you sleep enough. I actually had it took me maybe 18 months or a year, 12 to 18 months to get rid of the sleep debt from sleep apnea. Do you have an opinion on Ritalin and Adderall? Prescribed, not YOLO'd for fun. Well, it would be a lot better if you were YOLOing it for fun. No, I don't have an opinion on things that real doctors prescribe. That's their job, not mine. I mean, it's way outside of my wheelhouse to be talking about the efficacy of Ritalin and Adderall for someone with adult attention deficit disorder. That's just not something that I've spent a lot of time focusing on. So I don't have an opinion on that. If we're talking about Ritalin and Adderall for performance enhancing purposes for sports, major applications there. And I would bet that many of you would be surprised at how many of your favorite sports ball players are using some type of stimulant, but especially Ritalin and Adderall, for exactly that reason. I will soon have access to a free motion cable stack. What are the top 3 cable exercises that I have to try? I gotta admit, man, I don't mean to be a dick, but to me, trying cable exercises is not the same thing as going to Disneyland and trying the rides. It's not that exciting to me. Which cable exercise should I try? But I really like behind the back laterals. Out of all the lateral variations I've ever tried, it's one of the only ones that actually stretches my side delt a little bit. So that one's cool. But I usually use the cable stack as a way to train muscles that are difficult for me to train in other ways without being hurt. And that's mainly triceps. So for triceps, I do cross-body extensions. Katana extensions are pretty cool. And then the only other one that I would do would be a single arm rear delt fly, because you can get those to be lengthened biased when you do them on a cable stack. To be honest, that is the entirety of all the cable movements that I've done in the past year. Those 4 right there. I don't use cables. How could the wrist roller be logged or counted? I guess I would just count the weight that you have hanging from it and then count how many times you rolled it up and rolled it down. And then beyond that, you just need to know how to count. Have you ever taken DMAA? It was in the original Jack 3D, and I liked it. Well, take a look-see here, my friend. This is the label of the pre-workout that I posted today, Cracked Gold Edition. Let's go down the ingredients here. Caffeine, holy shit, 500 milligrams of caffeine. No one cares about this stuff. Blah, blah, blah. Oh, geranium extract. Do you know what that is? Do you? It's DMAA. This pre-workout is just as strong as the original Jack 3D, actually stronger. Last question of the day was more of a demand. Post more PR songs. So I threw up the songs 11 through 20 that I listened to the most on Spotify in 2022. Take a look at that if you give a shit. As always, my friends, like the video if you like the video. Leave any comments below. Subscribe if you haven't already. And have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.